The day I became the most hated man in my neighborhood was the same day I bought the entire lake they tried to ban me from. It started with a $500 fine just for fishing, with my grieving son. No warnings, no compassion. Just a woman in pearls and power suits who decided we didn't fit the community standard. But what she didn't know was that I had the resources, the receipts, and a reason to fight back. And when they came for my piece, I came for their system. This isn't just a story about HOA corruption. It's a story about class warfare in a gated suburb, about a father's promise and what happens when a quiet man decides the rules no longer serve justice. Stay with me, because by the time this ends, you'll see what happens when the lake answers back. If you're watching this from your car, parked just far enough from your own front door to breathe, let me guess. You've already received your second warning for non-conforming mulch. Or maybe it was your mailbox being half an inch too tall, or the basketball hoop visible from the street. Whatever it was, I know why you're really here. You want to know how I went from being the invisible man in Briarwood Hollow to the one name that made the queen of the HOA choke on her vintage rosé. My name is Dorian Vance. I wasn't always a troublemaker. In fact, trouble is something I spent most of my life outmaneuvering. Cybersecurity was my trade, building quiet firewalls to keep chaos out. It's ironic that the biggest breach I ever faced wasn't in a server room. It was in my own backyard. I didn't move to Briarwood Hollow to stir anything up. I moved here to stop bleeding. My wife Liana passed away 11 months ago in a hospital fire no one could explain. One moment she was texting me from the oncology floor, and the next I was signing forms while my son Jace sat catatonic in a waiting room chair, still clutching her scarf. We never got closure. Not from the hospital, not from the city, not even from her medical records. So I did what any widower who still had breath left would do. I ran. I cashed out my part of the business, liquidated everything except the equity shares in my partner's hands, and I found a quiet house tucked beside a private lake wrapped in evergreens and the illusion of civility. That's what Briarwood Hollow sells best, the illusion. The lake was the reason I chose the house on Larkspur Drive. Jace hadn't spoken more than 5 full sentences in 2 months. But when he saw the lake brochure in the realtor's office, his fingers tapped against it 3 times. Liana used to call that his tail. It meant yes. Fishing had been our last ritual as a family. Liana, in her sun hat, with a mystery novel, Jace with a quiet line in the water, and me pretending I knew what I was doing with bait. She'd said something to me on the dock once, weeks before things turned dark. You know it's not about the fish. It's about watching the people you love do something slow and peaceful together. So when Jace whispered, "Can we fish here?" I said yes. I should have said maybe. It was a Saturday morning in April, the kind that smelled like pine needles and dew. Jace had smiled for the first time in weeks when he reeled in a bluegill tiny, flapping his hands trembling like it was sacred. We were knee-deep in a moment so pure, I didn't notice the soft crunch of manufactured shoes until it was too late. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" The voice had the brittle edge of someone used to being obeyed. It cut through the lake mist like a blade. I turned. The woman was in her 50s, maybe early 60s, but her posture carried the impatience of someone who hadn't waited in line since '93, blonde bob, expensive athleisure that whispered, "I don't sweat, I instruct. Ambisol, sos, I instruct." A tablet in one hand, the Briarwood Hollow crest embroidered across her jacket. I extended a hand. "Morning, just some catch and release with my son, Dorian Vance. We moved in on Larkspur a few months ago." She didn't take my hand. Fishing is prohibited on the community lake. It's a direct violation of HOA Regulation 6.3 subsection B. I'm Celeste Rourke, president of the Homeowners Association. She said it like Queen of the Realm would have sounded more modest. I glanced at the signboard near the dock. It still listed fishing as a permitted activity. Our realtor said fishing was allowed. It was one of the reasons we chose this house. Celeste offered a tight smile that didn't quite touch her surgically refined eyes. That regulation was updated last month. All residents were notified via the HOA email. If you failed to read your messages, that's hardly the association's fault. The fine is $750 payable within 14 days. Beside me, Jace's hand lowered. He didn't say anything, but I saw the light vanish, just like that. The rest of the conversation isn't worth quoting. Celeste rattled off legalese like it was sacred scripture. Hooks were unsafe. Fish were aesthetic pollutants. Bait left smells. Residents didn't move here to see such rustic activities. She didn't say people like you, but I've lived long enough to hear it between the syllables. What she didn't know, what made her mistake fatal, was that I've made a career of decoding systems exactly like hers. I've been in rooms where hostile takeovers were disguised as wellness initiatives. Encrypted backdoors were built into citywide safety networks, where the men smiling at charity events also brokered dark web trades under shell companies named after Greek philosophers. Celeste Rourke was a dictator, and I'd just seen her palace. All I needed now were blueprints. I walked Jace back home without another word. He didn't ask me anything. He didn't need to. But as we passed the crooked lilac bush at the edge of our driveway, he spoke. "Why was she so angry about fishing, Dad?" "We weren't hurting anything." I looked down at him, his face too old for 13. "Because people like her sometimes care more about power than peace." He nodded like he understood, and maybe in some sad way he did. That night, after he went to bed, I opened my laptop. I logged into my server vault, created a new digital file, labeled it Rourke Briarwood Phase 1. And then I typed, "Entries and she find us for phishing. Time to find out what she's trying to catch." There's a rule in cybersecurity systems lie, but metadata doesn't. So, that night after Celeste Rourke marched away from our dock like she owned the earth beneath her Skechers, I did what I used to do best. I searched for footprints. Not the kind on the ground, the kind of digital ink. And in this case, the HOA bylaws. Briarwood Hollow's community website was predictably wrapped in fake warmth, slogans about elevated living and shared values, smiling couples holding wine glasses, blonde children are playing on freshly trimmed lawns, the usual visual sedative. But I wasn't there for the images. I dove straight into the regulatory documents. The first discrepancy regulation, 6.3 subsection B. Sure enough, it had been updated exactly 28 days ago. But here's the thing. Most HOAs use document control systems with open source time stamping. Briarwood didn't. It used a PDF upload with no versioning, no change history, no author tag. In other words, manual overwrite. I ran a metadata extraction script and found what I expected. Created March 3rd, modified March 3. Author admin, Rourke Properties Com. Not HOA admin, not Briarwood Hollow org, Rourke Properties. I smiled. Celeste wasn't just managing this neighborhood, she was monetizing it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I put on coffee and opened a clean notebook. The kind I hadn't used since Liana was alive. The kind reserved for people worth taking down. On the cover I wrote, Celeste Rourke, Playbook. Then beneath that, find me for non-permitted fishing. The realtor's brochure still lists catch and release fishing as a community amenity. The HOA regulation update was not properly disclosed. No documented vote. No version control. And finally, Rourke Properties is authoring HOA rules. In the world of corporate cybersecurity, that would be called a conflict of interest. In the real world, it's called corruption. The hidden party. It got better. At noon the next day, Jace and I were taking the trash out when I saw a Facebook post from Briarwood Life, the private neighborhood group I'd quietly joined under a burner profile. Celeste Rourke in full glam holding a champagne flute on a dock I recognized. My dock. The caption read, "Another perfect night at the lake with the best neighbors in the world. Grateful for our private community. Wine bottles, candles, a live acoustic duo, and maybe 20 guests. All while fishing was banned. Apparently aroma pollution from bait is a crime, but rosé at midnight is a sacred tradition." I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds, then showed Jace. He didn't laugh or rage or react. But he did mutter, "Guess we should have worn linen and brought wine instead of worms." I wanted to hug him and scream at the same time. Instead, I opened a new folder on my hard drive. I titled it, Rourke Inconsistencies, Visual Archive, The Unexpected Ally. That evening, I stopped by the Briarwood Community Library, a small structure that looked like a repurposed wine cellar from the outside, but inside smelled like oak and wisdom. The librarian, Evelyn Grant, was about 45, sharp brown eyes, denim shirt, rolled sleeves, a silver cuff bracelet that looked more like armor than jewelry. "Looking for anything in particular?" she asked, stacking donation books. I paused, then said, "Actually, yes. Do you have any records on past HOA actions, like historical resolutions, budget votes, and environmental policies?" She gave me a look, like I'd asked for the Necronomicon. Then slowly she nodded. "We keep paper copies. Not everything's digital. Let me show you." She led me to a filing cabinet that squeaked like it hadn't been touched in a decade. As she opened it, she added, "You're the guy who got fined for fishing with his kid, right?" I paused. "Is it that obvious?" Evelyn pulled out a yellowed folder, handed it to me, and smiled without humor. "Here, you'll want these." The last guy who asked similar questions moved out 6 months later. His house was on the market 2 weeks after he challenged Celeste at a board meeting. Strange coincidence. I raised an eyebrow. And what happened to the board vote he challenged? She tapped the file. You tell me. Inside were handwritten notes, meeting sign-ins, and photocopies of ballots from the past 10 years. Not HOA-issued PDFs, but real paper. Evelyn had been collecting them. I used to be on the events committee, she explained. Until I asked why the annual 4th of July budget was $18,000 when we use the same fireworks every year. And Celeste told me I was welcome to resign, so I did. She took a breath, then looked me dead in the eye. You planning to just pay the fine and lay low? I stared at the file in my hand. No, she smiled. Good, then let's get to work. Patterns in the paper. Back at my home office that night, I laid the documents out on the table and started mapping. HOA, Environmental Policy passed in 2016, filed by Rourke Properties LLC. 2019, Community use of shoreline, amenities updated, removed public gathering privileges. 2020, Noise Violation Clause amended to penalize backyard events after 6 p.m., 2 weeks after a neighbor hosted a quinceañera. 21, a sudden drop in lake maintenance spending despite higher dues. Each of these changes had two things in common. They disproportionately impacted new residents, especially families of color or working-class backgrounds. They always benefited from properties on or near the lake, properties owned or managed by Rourke-associated entities. The end of Part 2, the first blueprint. At 1:27 a.m., I had enough map to confirm it. Celeste wasn't just abusing power. She was using HOA law as a weapons system. I stood by the window staring out toward the moonlit lake. My dock, my son's memory, my wife's peace. And her poisoned empire? You're building palaces on ashes, Celeste, I whispered. Let's see how you handle a flood. I clicked Save All on the digital folder, locked it under encryption, and backed it up to 2 cold storage drives. Then I wrote 4 words on the cover of my notebook. She's not untouchable anymore. They say if you want to hide something, bury it in bureaucracy. But sometimes the best secrets live in plain sight, camouflaged by long emails, blurry PDFs, and meetings no one attends, except the ones who shouldn't be in charge to begin with. That's where I found Thatcher Dell. Technically, I found his name first on an archived attendance sheet from a 2018 HOA Audit Committee meeting. He'd signed and scribbled something in the comments section, then crossed it out. I thought nothing of it until I saw that same signature again in a 20 meeting, where a code enforcement review was convened over a resident dispute. In both cases, he'd filed objections. In both cases, his property taxes were reassessed shortly after. I did some digging. Turns out Thatcher Dell was a retired Army intelligence officer, late 60s widower, lived in a modest stone house near the East Side cul-de-sac. No flags, no yard art, no holiday lights. Just a small bronze plaque near his door that read, "Speak softly, record everything." So, I did what I rarely do. I rang the doorbell. He opened the door like a man who doesn't trust doors. Just a few inches. No words, just sharp eyes that scanned from my shoes to my collar. "I'm Dorian Vance," I said calmly. "You don't know me, but I think we've been looking at the same wolves in different disguises." He didn't blink. Then he nodded, once opened the door fully, and gestured me in with the same quiet precision you'd expect from someone who once defused bombs for a living. His living room was full of file cabinets, old military photographs, and a digital surveillance wall made from repurposed monitors. "Tea?" he asked. I said yes, not because I wanted tea, because men like him never ask questions they don't already have answers to. When he returned with 2 cups, I placed my tablet on the table and opened the folder labeled Rourke Inconsistencies. He didn't lean in, he didn't interrupt, just sat back, arms crossed, eyes soaking in the data like a sponge that knew how to kill mold. When I finished, I said, I think you've been through this fight longer than I have. He snorted. "You ever serve, son?" "No." "Ever infiltrate a structure from the inside without a map and surrounded by people who think you're the janitor?" I built anti-breach infrastructure for Fortune 500 companies. Thatcher sipped his tea. "Close enough." The archive. He led me to a room behind his kitchen. It looked like a home office at first, until he flipped a bookcase aside to reveal a hidden wall safe. "HOA's been watching the wrong people," he muttered, tapping in a code. "They thought I gave up after the 20 vote." The safe swung open to reveal rows of black binders. He handed me one titled Selective Enforcement, Phase Pattern Log. Inside was a decade-long chronicle of fines issued within 72 hours of public dissent. Families of color are fined at 3.6x the rate of white residents. Non-lakefront properties cited for garden violations during high-selling months. Notices conveniently leading to distressed sales followed by silent acquisitions through shell LLCs. I was stunned. Thatcher looked over his glasses. Karen Montrose, Diana Wu, the Rodales, all pushed out their homes, all bought by entities connected to Rourke Holdings. He handed me another binder labeled Land Use Forecast, Phase 4. You know what's funny? He said. Celeste submitted preliminary plans to the zoning office for additional lakefront development 5 years ago. I blinked, but the HOA doesn't own the lake. He smiled darkly. Not yet, but she's counting on buying it when the lease expires. The bigger game. At that moment, something clicked for me. This wasn't about a fishing fine. This wasn't about Jace and me, not entirely. This was about land money and the illusion of sanctified power. About the people who dress their greed in community language and act like gatekeepers to a kingdom they don't even legally control. I leaned forward. I want to buy the lake. Thatcher raised an eyebrow. You have that kind of capital. I nodded in connections. He paused, then smirked. Then you'd better talk to someone who knows how deep this rabbit hole goes. The banker's ledgers. That night, Thatcher introduced me to Samuel Rowan, a retired banker and former president of Lakeside National, the very institution that handled Briarwood Hollow's original mortgage clusters. Samuel was elegant calm, the kind of man who spoke in complete sentences even when he was mad. He'd been watching Celeste for years, knew her ties to old money, knew she banked on silence and social hierarchy. He welcomed me into his study like we were old friends, then said, "You're the first one with the skills and the stomach to hit her where it hurts. We've been waiting for someone like you." Together we compiled everything. Shell companies linked to Celeste Briar Edge Holdings, Rourke Estates, Elmwater LLC. Timeline of foreclosures aligned with HOA fine spikes. Closed-door emergency board meetings, minutes conveniently unrecorded. AOA vendor kickbacks for lawn maintenance contracts, all companies traced to Celeste's brother-in-law. He showed me something that made my blood run cold. A scanned permit application submitted to Meridian Corp., marked confidential. Project title, Briarwood Executive Expansion. Villa's location, Eastern Lakeside parcels, pending acquisition. Celeste wasn't preserving the lake. She was prepping to bulldoze it. The message, before I left that night, Samuel pulled a small envelope from his safe. Inside was a black and white photo of Liana Vance, my late wife, smiling, standing beside a medical billing office. She tried to blow the whistle on a different Rourke operation, the hospital, the cover-ups, the financial laundering. I couldn't breathe. "You think her death was an accident?" he asked quietly, because I don't. I walked out of that house and into the rain, my heartbeat pounding like it hadn't since the day I got that call from the hospital. It wasn't just about fishing anymore. It was about finishing what my wife started. You can always feel the moment a war becomes personal. It's not when they fine you, not even when they humiliate you. It's when they come for the people you love, quietly, systematically, strategically. I used to believe that wars were fought with weapons. Now I know they're fought with paper rumors and targeted isolation. The little things become blades. The morning after my meeting with Samuel and Thatcher, I opened my mailbox to find a citation envelope with a bright red urgent sticker. Violation, weed growth exceeding 3.5 inches. Penalty 200. I measured the section in question myself. The tallest blade was 3 inches. I laughed, I really did, until I got the next one. Violation, unapproved mailbox, paint tone, penalty $175. Then another. Violation, improper placement of solar lights, over 18 from walkway, penalty $250. By the end of the week, I'd received 6 citations, totaling over 1,200 no photos, no prior warnings. The surveillance, then the photos began. Not in envelopes, on Facebook, on Nextdoor. Posts from concerned residents showing our recycling bin blocking line of sight. Jace's bicycle left unsafely in the driveway, and my favorite, our garbage bag tied with blue string instead of regulation. Black twist ties. I knew what this was. Celeste had unleashed her network. They weren't watching their neighbors. They were hunting me. The schoolyard goes silent, but the worst came from Jace. He came home one Thursday, his face pale. "Dad, am I making people move?" I stopped what I was doing. "What do you mean?" He held out his phone, a group chat screen. "Jace's dad is trying to make our homes lose value. My mom said, we'll have to leave if he buys the lake. He's trying to ruin the hollow. He's not even from here." He turned the screen off, sat on the couch, looked 10 years older. "Coach said I should take a break from the team until things calmed down." I sat beside him, every fiber of my being screaming, "Fight." But he needed comfort more than war. "Jace, do you remember what your mom used to say about lake water?" He nodded. "It carries what you put into it." "Exactly. Right now they're putting poison in the lake." And we wait. No, I said softly, we purify it. The legacy photo that night, I pulled out the photo Samuel gave me. Liana, in a white coat, was standing outside a billing office tied to Rourke Medical Group. She had her badge in one hand, a clipboard on the other. She was smiling, but her eyes looked worried. And I remembered something she told me once, on a night when she couldn't sleep. If I disappear one day, it's probably not cancer. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. The paper trail gets bolder. 2 days later, I got a phone call. Block number A, disguised voice. You're not the first to try, Mr. Vance, but you'll be the last if you keep going. Click. I recorded the call, ran voice analysis. Nothing definitive except the pattern, the cadence, the breath control. I'd heard it before. Celeste's nephew, Mark Rourke, ran the community watch program. He'd once been a private investigator. Now he was a glorified HOA hound. I cross-referenced his voice with a publicly posted training video on the Briarwood site. 94% match. Evelyn's map, meanwhile, Evelyn dropped off a hand-drawn timeline map she'd been building. 2012, 2014, HOA audits increased. 2015, 2017, budget reallocation toward beautification. 2018-21, foreclosures spike after regulation changes. 22, present displacement of legacy residents, rise of Rourke Holdings properties. And then in red ink, next target Eastern Lakeside parcel, currently public HOA lease, expires in 34 days. It wasn't just a map, it was a war plan. I stared at it, then circled the expiration date. We make our move before that clock hits zero, the quiet betrayal. But then came a deeper betrayal. I received a notice from the city council office. Notice of potential zoning review on Larkspur Drive property. Apparently, the deck I inherited from the prior owner didn't have updated safety certification. I checked the Sender Office of Structural Compliance, reviewed by Officer R. Ellis. The signature at the bottom, Richard Ellis, Celeste's cousin. They were using the city against me. This was no longer HOA harassment. It was municipal warfare. The night conversation. That night I met Samuel and Thatcher again. We sat beneath the pergola at Samuel's home, the crickets louder than the whispers we traded. We have one shot, I said. Thatcher lit his cigar. When? Before she announces the special assessment, I replied, when she needs to prove to her backers that she can deliver the lake. Samuel nodded. I know the right person at Meridian, quiet, trustworthy. I'll arrange the meeting. The real cost. Before I left, I asked them the question I'd been avoiding. Do you think Liana knew what she was up against? Samuel's gaze was heavy. She knew, and it terrified her, but she did it anyway. Thatcher added, that's what courage looks like, son. Doing what you must when no one's watching, when everyone wants you to stop. As I walked back home, I looked up at the stars and made a promise to the only person who ever made me believe in peace. They tried to bury your truth, Liana, but I'm going to dig it back up and I'll flood their kingdom with it. There's an old proverb from the world I used to work in. When the offer is too generous, read the terms. When it's too quiet, expect a bang. The offer I received on a crisp Tuesday morning looked like an olive branch neatly wrapped in silk, with just enough perfume to mask the smell of something rotting underneath. The invitation. It came in the form of a handwritten note delivered to my mailbox without postage. Heavy paper, embossed gold edges, smelled faintly of lilac and something colder. Mr. Vance, I believe we've had a misunderstanding. I'd like to extend a private invitation for tea this Friday at 3 p.m. Just you, me, and Clarity, Celeste Rourke. I showed it to Evelyn. She frowned. She's either panicking or planning something. Maybe both. Should I go? Only if you've got a knife hidden in your smile. The tea and the smile? Friday, 3 p.m. Celeste's home on Briarcrest Hill wasn't a house, it was a performance. Every angle is perfect. Every flower bed is a curated display. Even the wind felt instructed to whistle in moderation. She greeted me at the door in a white blouse, cream slacks, and a pearl necklace that looked like it had a non-disclosure agreement. Dorian, so glad you came. I nodded, stepping into her home. Curiosity is a powerful motivator. She laughed, like I'd said something charming, then led me into a sunroom overlooking the lake. The same lake she fined my son and me for enjoying. The irony wasn't lost on me. The offer. The conversation began with small talk. Weather, the community barbecue, her concern for my son, and then the knife came out wrapped in honey. You know, she said, swirling her tea, a man like you has so much potential here. Your background, your intellect. It would be such a shame to waste that on conflict. I raised an eyebrow. You mean resisting your property grabs? She chuckled like I'd told a joke. You're very passionate. I admire that. So, here's what I'm proposing. We clear your violations. I'll personally recommend you for the HOA advisory board. Help us shape the future. Be part of the solution. And the catch. Her smile didn't falter. You agree to drop this crusade against the lake. The community vote is coming up. It's already polling in my favor. You can still come out looking like a gentleman. I leaned back, studying her. You want to sell me on civility right after declaring war on my son's bike, my mailbox, and my dignity. Her eyes darkened just slightly. War is a strong word, Mr. Vance. I prefer pressure. The trap, I let the silence sit long enough to be uncomfortable. Then I stood. Here's the truth, Celeste. You're not inviting me to tea. You're inviting me to drown. I pulled a folder from my satchel. Inside was a printed copy of the draft architectural plans she submitted to Meridian Development. Last year, lakefront villas, private docks, restricted access roads. Her signature, her company's letterhead. She blinked. Where did you get this? I don't think that's the right question, I said quietly. I think the right question is, what happens when everyone else sees it? The move. That night I met with Tom Branson, a mid-level executive at Meridian Development Corporation, arranged through Samuel's connections. We met at a wine bar 3 towns over, neutral territory, untraceable, private. Tom looked exhausted, like a man used to watching assets bleed. I'll be direct. I told him I want the lake. I can pay in cash. I can close fast. He didn't blink. Celeste has a 60-day exclusivity negotiation. She's offering $300,000 in 4 installments over 18 months. And you need what? Immediate cash. Meridian's hemorrhaging after the downtown commercial collapse. I reached into my coat and handed him a manila envelope. Inside, a certified letter of intent and proof of funds. Offer $400,000 terms. All cash. Close in 7 days. Tom's hands shook slightly. You realize this will make enemies. I nodded. I'm counting on it. The trap closes. By Monday, we had a preliminary agreement signed. To mask the purchase, I formed Vanbridge Acquisitions, a shell company headquartered in New Hampshire, with legal agents untraceable to me without serious digging. Celeste wouldn't know until it was too late. And the best part? The recreational use lease the HOA held over the lake expired in 26 days. Renewal at the sole discretion of the new owner. That owner, me. The panic begins. 3 days after I filed the paperwork, Karen Myers, a former HOA board member who'd resigned under Celeste, slipped me a text. She's holding emergency board meetings. She's sweating. She knows something's wrong. She just doesn't know what. I smiled. The trap was working. But I wasn't done. I needed her to commit publicly. Because once she went all in, I could flip the entire community against her. The special assessment. 1 week later, flyers went out across Briarwood Hollow. Community vision plan. Elevating the lake, HOA, special meeting, mandatory attendance, proposal. 50-month assessment increase to fund lake revitalization and security upgrades. Translation. She needed the community to fund her land grab. She was so desperate she forgot one thing. The lake wasn't hers anymore. There's a particular kind of silence that exists before a system collapses. It's not quiet, not really. It's the buzz of printers at full speed. The clatter of email alerts, the twitchy fingers of bureaucrats pretending nothing's wrong. It's desperation polished to look like confidence. Celeste was humming like a hive before a storm, and I was holding the lightning. The false parade. The HOA meeting was set in the Briarwood Hollow Community Pavilion, a marble-tiled hall built to look like a country club, but funded entirely by resident dues. Celeste stood at the podium beneath a banner that read, Vision 25 Securing Our Future. There were mock-ups projected onto the screens behind her, a renovated lakeside lounge, a wine tasting deck, private wellness zones along the eastern shore. Words like harmony, security, and value elevation floated across her slides like gospel. She was selling the future, a future she didn't know I already owned. The vote, Celeste announced a proposal. Beginning next month, we will implement a modest $50 monthly assessment to support long overdue lake improvements. This will secure our place as the most desired community in the county. The room murmured. She smiled. It's already past board pre-approval, but we want our residents to feel involved. There will be an advisory vote next Friday, informal of course, but important. Translation. She thought she had already won, and she didn't know her leverage was about to evaporate in front of a crowd. The reveal begins. That night, I returned home to a voicemail. Mr. Vance, this is Tom Branson from Meridian. The wire transfer cleared. All documents have been filed with the county registrar. Congratulations, the lake is yours. I closed my eyes. It was done. After all the fines, after the threats, after watching my son cry because of rumors whispered by playground parents, we held the deed. The last audit, before revealing my move, I called in Eliza Wren, a licensed water ecologist I'd worked with years ago on a tech campus wetland project. She ran a full ecological analysis of the lake. What did she find? Algae overgrowth from poorly regulated lawn, chemical runoff, nitrate spikes beyond state thresholds, evidence of declining fish health. Several inflow pipes are partially blocked by debris from a private party pavilion. Celeste's favorite spot. Eliza submitted an official environmental report filed with the county. Reason: justification to terminate the HOA's recreational use agreement immediately. Security and silence. With the paperwork in hand, I hired Hollow Point Security, a private firm run by a former DHS operative. Their job: quietly install perimeter surveillance, secure the lake's 10-foot shoreline buffer, prepare signage and motion-activated sensors, draft a trespass enforcement policy. It had to be silent, seamless, legal. Celeste would never see it coming. Celeste's last play. As expected, she doubled down. Sent glossy flyers, sent 2 HOA reps door to door with free pastries and talking points. Even hosted a community bonfire near the dock, complete with live music and a drone recording the turnout for social media. She believed she was untouchable. She believed wrongly the night before. On the eve of the advisory vote, I stood alone at the lake. The air was still. The water was dark, calm, and reflective. I thought about Liana. Carry what you love into the fire, she once told me, but make sure it survives. And that's when I decided, tomorrow the fire would come, and this time it would burn up the lies. It wasn't just a meeting, it was a coronation. Celeste Rourke didn't want a vote. She wanted a spectacle, a final glittering affirmation that she controlled not just policy, but perception. So she made it a masquerade, an invitation-only lakeside gala. Themed Briarwood elegance through the ages, attire, black tie. Attendance legacy, residents only. Translation: everyone she didn't like was uninvited, which of course meant I would be attending front row. Arrival at dusk. The sun was setting as I approached the lake in a black suit custom fit with cufflinks Liana had given me for our anniversary. Samuel stood beside me, dressed like a statesman. Thatcher crisp in his vintage military tuxedo. Evelyn red velvet gown, notebook tucked into a clutch. Behind us, 2 quiet men from Hollow Point Security waited beside a black SUV, out of sight but not out of reach. I stepped past the manicured hedge line, my shoes crunching lightly on crushed stone. There were candles, champagne towers, a jazz quartet playing something breathy and expensive. Celeste stood at the far end of the lake on a makeshift stage, holding a wireless mic. She hadn't seen me yet, but the crowd had. The murmurs began immediately. The speech, Celeste's voice floated through the night like syrup over knives. Briarwood Hollow has always been more than a neighborhood. It's a sanctuary, a vision, a standard. She gestured toward a large easel behind her draped in silk. Tonight, I'm honored to unveil the future of our lake. A reimagined space, more secure, more elegant, more exclusive. A nod. The silk dropped. Behind it, architectural renderings of private villas, clubhouse expansions, lakefront terraces, a complete transformation of the eastern shoreline. With your support, we'll turn this lake into a legacy, one that elevates all of us. Applause, timid at first, then louder. And just as it crested, except it's not your lake anymore. The silence that followed, Celeste froze. Slowly she turned her gaze toward me. I stepped onto the platform, calmly holding a legal folder in one hand and a microphone in the other. Pardon the interruption, Celeste. I'd hoped to let you finish, but you've built this entire presentation on a lie, and I think it's time everyone saw the deed. Gasps. Samuel handed me the paperwork. I held it up. Effective 7 days ago, full ownership of this lake and its shoreline buffer transferred to Vanbridge Acquisitions. A private entity, the recreational use lease held by the HOA expired this morning at 12:01 a.m. Another pause. A few audible no ways, a few gasps. I took a breath. Vanbridge Acquisitions is mine. I own the lake. Collapse in real time. Celeste stepped forward, her expression unreadable. You can't do this. The community was never given the truth. I interrupted. I turned to the crowd. You were told this assessment was to maintain the lake. You were told the HOA had authority. What you weren't told is that Celeste Rourke had submitted permits to rezone this lake for luxury villas under the banner of her personal development firm. More murmurs. I stepped aside as a Hollow Point guard handed Samuel a remote. He pressed play. On a large portable screen, we projected a PDF zoning permit for Briar Edge Villas, A video Celeste speaking to Meridian execs about investor returns. A drone clip lake pollution and shoreline damage linked to HOA misuse. Then I said it. Tonight all of you were about to be sold something you already owned and taxed for it while she profited. The aftershock. The silence afterward was unnatural. Celeste's mouth opened, but no words came. And then, a single clap. Then, 2, then 20. And just like that, the masquerade shattered. Residents walked away. Some lingered long enough to glare at her. Others whispered. A few took photos. By the time I left the stage, Celeste was standing alone, her champagne glass trembling slightly in her hand. She called after me. "You won't keep this. I have friends at City Hall. You have no idea who you're fighting." I turned back just once. "No, Celeste, you don't. There are moments when power doesn't crumble. It lashes out. When people like Celeste Rourke lose their grip, they don't fall gracefully. They claw, they scheme. And when they think no one is looking, they poison." Literally, whispers in the dark. The masquerade humiliated her. But humiliation isn't defeat, not for someone like Celeste. By Monday, the rumors began. "Did you hear the new owner is draining the lake for a helipad?" My neighbor said the lake is being turned into a dumping zone for tech waste. Someone saw tanks, chemicals, the water's turning green. I traced the sources. They led straight back to HOA board chat logs leaked anonymously into a private resident group by someone still inside. There were voice memos too, one from Celeste herself. "If we can't control the lake, we'll make the community fear it. Make the board believe it's a health risk. He can't keep a toxic swamp, not in this neighborhood." The implication was clear. She was willing to make the water unsafe if it meant destroying my credibility. Caught in the act, I didn't have to wait long. Thursday night, motion sensors near the lake perimeter picked up movement. My Hollow Point team switched to thermal feed. 3 figures. One crouched near the waterline with a bottle. Another stood watch. The third looked very much like Celeste. We caught it all, on video. Celeste Rourke, president of the Briarwood HOA, is pouring an unknown liquid into the lake near the children's fishing dock. We didn't confront her. We called the police. The arrest, Friday morning, as residents gathered outside the HOA office for a scheduled board Q&A about lake safety squad cars rolled in. Celeste was handcuffed beside a fresh fruit platter and a table full of HOA pamphlets. She demanded immunity. She cited her family's political ties. She said she was performing environmental tests. Then they showed her the footage. Not just from the night of the act, but from prior weeks. Footage of HOA funds being used for unauthorized surveillance. Footage of her secretary shredding internal notices meant for the community. Celeste Rourke was charged with criminal trespassing, attempted environmental contamination, misappropriation of community funds, unlawful use of public office for personal financial gain. And that was just the beginning. Fallout, within days. 3 HOA board members resigned. A county audit of Briarwood HOA's finances was announced. Residents began filing civil suits for harassment manipulation and illegal property devaluation tactics. And the mayor, Mayor Elijah Kerr, a known Rourke family ally, suddenly announced he wouldn't seek re-election. His reason? A need to reflect, right? Sapphira stands up. In the next emergency HOA meeting, something extraordinary happened. Sapphira Lang, the florist, Celeste once threatened over her lease, stood up and said, "I was afraid of her. We all were. But that fear kept our children from fishing, kept neighbors from talking, kept good people from staying. And now, look where silence led us. We deserve better." Starting today, the crowd applauded. And just like that, a vote of no confidence was initiated. Celeste was officially removed from all board-related activity. Even if she posted bail, her reign was over. The legacy shifts. I met with Evelyn, Samuel, and Thatcher under the old oak by the lake. We were quiet at first. Then Samuel said, "She nearly poisoned children to win a war she already lost." I nodded. "She didn't just poison the lake," I said. "She poisoned this entire community with fear, silence, and rules designed to exclude." Evelyn looked at the water. "Then it's time to clean it." It's strange what peace sounds like after war. Not silence, not a celebration, but the rustle of paper, the murmur of neighbors apologizing to each other, and the quiet thump of old signs being pulled from lawns. The Briarwood Hollow that emerged after Celeste Rourke's fall wasn't perfect, but it was finally honest. The meeting that changed everything. It was Thatcher who suggested we hold the next HOA meeting, not in the pavilion, but on the lake's edge. No microphones, no staged floral arrangements, just lawn chairs, sun hats, and a long fold-out table with a hand-painted sign that said, HOA Reform. by us for us. Nearly every resident came, even the ones who had once sneered at me in driveways and avoided eye contact at the mailbox. And when Sapphira Lang, now acting interim president, stood and cleared her throat, something shifted. Today she began. We propose the most sweeping set of reforms this HOA has ever seen. And this time everyone will vote, and everyone will be heard. The 3 pillars. We introduced the new governance model that Samuel, Evelyn, and I had spent nights drafting. Term limits for board members. No one would hold power longer than 24 months. No exceptions. Ethics Committee. 3. Rotating members selected randomly every 6 months would review all fines, zoning decisions, and disputes. Their findings would be public. Full transparency charter. All financial decisions, contractor partnerships, and community regulations would require 75% resident approval and be posted 14 days before implementation. The vote. It was unanimous. Even former Rourke allies, shamed by public exposure, stood up and voted in favor. And with that single paper ballot, we took back our community. The final turn. That night, I gathered everyone at the lake, this time not in secrecy, but in celebration. Jace helped me hang a new wooden sign by the dock. It read, Rachel's Lake, in memory of peace, family, and the right to heal. We roasted marshmallows. Neighbors brought music. Kids who'd once been shamed for being too loud jumped off the dock in their clothes. And for the first time since we arrived, Jace didn't look around to see who was watching. He smiled. Mom would have liked this. I nodded, blinking back tears. She would have loved it. The quietest victory. The next morning, I visited the county registrar one final time. I filed the deed for Rachel's Lake Trust, transferring ownership from Vanbridge Acquisitions to a nonprofit community-run trust, with 3 conditions. The lake can never be sold to a private developer. Fishing will always be allowed, especially for children. The name Rachel must remain as a reminder of what peace costs. I walked out of the office and stood beneath the county seal, knowing one thing. We didn't just win, we rebuilt. 1 year later, Briarwood Hollow was unrecognizable. Not in architecture, but in spirit. Gone were the surveillance whispers and weaponized bylaws. Gone were the silent neighbors and the cold glances across HOA meetings. What remained was a community reborn, stronger scarred, but awake. And every Saturday morning, the sound of fishing lines whizzing into Rachel's Lake cut across the calm like a hymn. The new era. Sapphira Lang was officially elected HOA president unopposed. Her first act, a full audit of the past 10 years. Her second, posting it publicly. It revealed 96,000 of unaccounted HOA funds. 7 properties were unfairly cited for foreclosure. An entire network of contractors with familial ties to Celeste Rourke. Lawsuits were filed, settlements followed, and one by one the old regime vanished. Celeste's fall. Celeste Rourke's trial began in early spring. Her attorneys tried everything: character defense, procedural challenges, and victim narrative. None of it stuck. The footage, the permits, the paper trail, all pointed to calculated abuse. She was found guilty on 4 counts, sentenced to 2 years probation, and ordered to pay restitution to the community, ironically into the very trust that now controlled the lake. She left town shortly after her home sitting unsold on the market for 8 months. A ghost of a throne no one wanted. Jace's moment. That summer, Jace stood on a temporary stage built on the dock. He wore a green polo and tan shorts, a clipboard in hand, and a microphone taped to a broom handle. Welcome everyone to the first ever Junior Conservation Day. The crowd, dozens of parents and children, cheered. He pointed to a whiteboard. Today we're going to learn how to fish and test the water for safety. Because we take care of what we love, right? Dozens of small hands shot into the air, right? I watched from a bench under a maple tree, hand resting on Liana's old camera bag. Click. Captured. A memory built on the ashes of another. Samuel's scholarship. Later that month, Samuel Washington and I stood outside the Rachel Vance Memorial Pavilion, which opened just beyond the lake's west shore. We're starting with 10 scholarships, he said, smiling. Kids who've lost a parent. Doesn't matter where they're from. I nodded. Rachel would have made it 100. Samuel laughed. Then we better keep building. We shook hands. He pulled me into a hug. You didn't just change this place, Dorian. You redeemed it. The final entry, back home that evening, I opened my notebook, the one I'd started the night Celeste found us. Only 1 page remained. I wrote, "Never underestimate what a father can do when grief becomes purpose. Never underestimate what a community can do when fear becomes fire. And never ever underestimate the quiet man at the lake with a broken heart and a plan." I closed the book, then picked up my phone. The epilogue video. If you're watching this, you already know the story. Maybe you came for the drama, maybe for justice. Maybe you're facing your own version of a Celeste Rourke. Either way, here's what I'll leave you with. Rules are only as powerful as the silence that surrounds them. Speak, document, build allies, then strike quietly, legally, and absolutely. They thought a fine would scare me. They didn't know who I'd already lost. They didn't know what peace cost. They didn't know I was here to reclaim it. This was never about fishing. It was always about dignity. And now every line cast into Rachel's lake is a reminder: we healed, we stayed, we won. And so the lake is quiet again. Not silent, but peaceful. Children laugh along its edge. Families picnic where rules once reigned. And the echoes of injustice that once poisoned these waters have been replaced with something rare: healing. But this story was never just about a man, a fine, or a fight. It's about every system that hides behind formality to protect power, and every soul that chooses to rise quietly, strategically, and relentlessly against it. Because sometimes the most powerful rebellion isn't loud, it's legal, it's calculated. It's just, so if you're watching this and you've ever been told, that's just how things work here. Remember, systems are made by people, and they can be unmade by courage. Share this story. Tell your own. And if you're standing by your own Rachel's Lake, protect it or take it back. Because peace doesn't come from permission, it comes from principle. And justice. Justice begins with someone who decides, enough.